Welcome, early birds, to Hot Topics. We have a big crowd and a fun topic and a very engaged speaker coming up. And we'll be starting at the top of the hour, so roughly 2 minutes. 1 minute, and we will kick off our webinar. All right. It is the top of the hour, and it's time for our quarterly hot topics. And this hot topic is going to be budgeting in the Sage Intacct core financials, as well as the highlights of release 3. And I would love this opportunity to introduce your speaker. If we could go to the next slide. Your speaker today is Beth Woodall, who is a senior Intacct consultant with LBMC Technology Solutions. And the second thing I want to do is I really want to thank our sponsor, Avid Exchange. Hearing from Avid Exchange right around halftime. Beth will finish up on budgeting. And before we go into release 3 highlights, Avid will be sharing a little bit. If you look in the chat, you'll also find an ebook that Avid has provided for us, and it's about how to close the digital skills gap with upskilling initiatives. And I invite everyone to take advantage of that resource. It's a really good read. So please feel free to do that. We offer 2 CPE credits for this webinar. In order to be eligible for CPE, you must answer all poll questions. Our team will get your CPE certificates out to you within 2 weeks. And then following the webinar, we will send you the recording, the slides, and a survey. We'll send that via email. So now that we've got that out of the way, I'd like to introduce you to Beth. And Beth, before her role as a senior Intacct consultant at LBMC, Beth did consulting. She did integration and implementations for private equity firms. And prior to that, Beth was a seasoned professional with over 13 years of accounting experience. Through her career, she's worked in many industries. All of these fit very, very well with LBMC's client base: tech startups, medical, manufacturing, and services. And the diversity in this experience has enabled her to gain a broad perspective on not only accounting practices, but how to best leverage those practices for the benefit of our clients. Beth has developed a specialty in contracts, and she uses her past experience and knowledge to think outside the box to come up with the best solutions for her clients. She is able to efficiently review, analyze, and interpret complex accounting scenarios, ensuring that the client's needs are met. Beth holds a degree in business administration from Faulkner University in Montgomery, Alabama, and does a wonderful job in leading my book club, where I'm always looking forward to what she has to say. So, with that, Beth, the presentation is yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Dawn. I appreciate that. Yes, Dawn and I are avid readers. We love our book club. So I know that that's something I always look forward to. But something else I look forward to is speaking with you all today about budgets. So I don't know about you guys, but this year has flown by in the blink of an eye. And, we're starting to approach the latter end of 2023. And so some people might have their thoughts going towards, pumpkin spice lattes, but not us. We are thinking about budgets. Well, okay, some of us actually might be thinking about those pumpkin spice lattes. That's okay too. But we're thinking about budgets and how we can use those and how we create those as we go into our 2024. And so for some of you, you might be using budgets currently, but you haven't migrated them over into Intacct just yet. And then some of you, you have them in Intacct, but you don't really do much with them throughout the year. And so you just always need a refresher every time we get up to this budgeting process. And so it really doesn't matter what your skill level is here. So we're going to walk through the whole process from start to finish. We're going to talk about how do we create those budgets and how do we use that data? How do we get it into the system? And hopefully by the end of all of this, that you're going to be able to walk away with a few little tidbits that are going to help you with your budgeting process. All right, so again, our goal today is to learn more about how budgets work within Intacct. How do we create budgets from scratch or by using existing data? Where and how do we import those budgets? And then finally, how can we use our budgets in our financial reports? Well, before we begin, the key thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we have those correct permissions within Intacct. Now, there are many aspects of this budgeting process that even an employee user type can do. However, there are some steps like importing those budgets or deleting of budgets that only a business user type can do. So let's just keep that in mind. Now, once we have established that we do have those correct permissions within Intacct, that next task is going to be to determine what periods we want to budget against. Now, for most of you, that probably looks like monthly periods, but some of you actually might decide to budget towards quarterly periods. Either way is perfectly fine. We just need to make a decision on that part. And then once we've made a decision on what reporting periods that we want to budget against, we need to make sure that our reporting periods have been created within Intacct. So we can verify those by simply going over to reports and then setup and then reporting periods. Now, there's a key here. We need to make sure that we've marked those periods as used for budgeting and that no reporting periods overlap. So, for example, we can't mark our monthly reporting periods for budgeting like we have here for November and December, but then also mark our quarterly periods as budgetable too. So you'll see here in this example, we've got December and November marked for budgeting, but not our fourth quarter. And so vice versa, if you chose to do quarterly budgeting, we would not have the months listed for budgeting, but instead we would have for fourth quarter. All right. So what happens if you get to those, like if you're looking in the system and you find out your future periods aren't in there? So, well, we do have a few options here. You could add them one by one manually, which takes some time. You could even go get a template and import that. That's going to save you some time. But here's a pro tip. If you use standard accounting periods, let's not waste time manually adding them one by one. Instead, we're going to add a draft journal entry, and we're going to date that into the future. We're going to put that out to our ending future period. You could even push it out several years. Then we're going to go to company, setup, import data, go ahead and click default next to reporting periods, and then create. And what this is going to do is it's going to create all of your reporting periods until the date of your draft journal entries, and it's going to mark your monthly ones as used for budgeting. So super awesome, cool trick that the system has there. But don't forget, you do need to go back and delete that draft journal entry. You don't want that just hanging out there. All right, so the next thing we need to think about is what level of detail are we wanting on our budgets? So creating a budget using dimensions offers greater flexibility and detail in our reporting. And while using dimensions is optional, I do recommend including them in your budgets for reporting purposes. So, for example, your company might want to compare budgeted expenses to your actual expenses by location, by department, or maybe even both. If your budget doesn't include those dimensions, you're not going to be able to run this type of report. What if your company has decided they want to start tracking revenue by salesperson? Well, by budgeting for revenue and including that employee dimension, we can run those reports comparing budget versus actual for each salesperson. Any dimension that's available in our general ledger can be used within the budget. So a good rule of thumb here is that if your actuals are going to include the dimension, let's go ahead and include that in our budget. And that way, we are going to be able to compare at the same level of detail, truly apples to apples here. Well, and since our level of detail is determined by our reporting needs, each GL account can be budgeted at a different level. So for some accounts, that may mean that you use dimensions, and for some accounts, you may choose not to. It is completely up to you and what your specific needs are. All right, so that's a great time for poll question number 1. All right, I think we've...
I was talking while muted. I'm hoping that the poll questions work a little bit better than the chat. We're working on it. Sorry about that, folks. So hopefully you can see poll question number 1. When do you normally start your budget process? It looks like people can see it because I'm starting to get responses. Do you start it in the 3rd quarter, the 4th quarter? We delay as long as possible. Who even uses a budget? I don't know. So we'll give you a few seconds here to complete the poll question. And remember, with the poll questions, if you're here for CPE, you have to answer all the poll questions as proof of attendance at the webinar. So here we go. I will be closing this down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here are the results. Over half of you are sharing in the 3rd quarter with a significant 32% budgeting in the 4th quarter. And then I think we're having some fun with who uses a budget and we delay as long as possible. But there's a good indication of what your peers are doing.
Very awesome. Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I might have been one of those people who clicked I delay as long as possible. So budgets, they're not always super fun, but they are very super beneficial. So kudos to you that started in third quarter. All right. So Intacct budgeting breaks down to basically 4 steps. Okay. So first, we want to create a budget within Intacct in our budget repository. Then we're going to prepare our budget data. So this is typically our biggest lift right here, is preparing our data. Then we're going to import our data into the system. And then finally, we want to maintain those budgets and report on them. So it's a pretty simple workflow. Again, our biggest lift is probably going to be in preparing our budget data and just gathering that information. But let's jump right in with creating a budget. So depending on how we set up our budgets, you might not need to create a new budget for each year. There are no limits to the number of reporting periods that you can include within your budget. So just by adding those additional periods, we can continue using that same default budget and still retain the data from our previous years. Adding reporting periods to an existing budget can minimize the need to edit our financial reports later. So we're going to talk about that later as we start getting over into the report section. But let's go ahead and create a budget in the system. So where do we need to do that? So we're going to go to budgets and then budgets repository. We're going to hit that little plus sign next to the budgets repository. And this is where we're going to kind of put in some basic information. We need to go ahead and create a budget ID. Do be sure to spell your budget ID. If you're using words, spell it correctly. That is going to be very beneficial when you're going to populate your template, because you might get an error on it. If you spell it wrong here, spell it right on the template and vice versa. Now, if this is your very first budget, we want to select that option for create a new budget, and then we want to check the box for default budget. This is basically just going to give us the opportunity to have these budgets roll into our out-of-the-box financial reports that Intacct has already graciously provided for us, some of those utilizing budgets. Now, there is this other option here for create a budget from existing budget and reporting period range. So what is that used for? Well, that's a great question. So many companies develop an annual budget that remains untouched for the entire year. And so simple as that can be, we're just going to create that budget. We're going to use that for multiple years going forward just by appending it by adding our additional future periods. But in contrast, we do have some companies that use multiple budgets in a fiscal year. Now, this could be because you want to revise the budget halfway through the year, and then you want to have the revised budget, but then also maintain an untouched budget. Or you might choose to have an additional budget for, forecasting purposes. And that's perfectly fine. And so using an existing budget that's already in the system is going to give you the opportunity to copy that data over and then maybe just manipulate some of the data points. It just can speed up that process for you. Now we need to prepare our budget data. And the bad news here is I can't do that for you. And I can't really even give you some cool tips and tricks for just preparing your budget data or creating your budget in general. Now, once you have gathered your budget data and you know what you're wanting to do with it, that part is a bit simpler. We can get that into the system, and we've got a couple of ways to do that. So you do have your choice of entering it manually, or the more preferred way, import it using a template. Now, just with like most things with an Intacct that we can import, Intacct can give us some basic templates that are already provided in the system. So we can get one of those by simply going to our company setup checklist. So you can find that under company setup and then import data. And we can download the template from there. However, you can see my template here that I downloaded. The standard template only includes 3 reporting periods, and the columns aren't even titled correctly. So as we can see here, it's a generic budgetable period 1, period 2, so on and so forth. And the reporting periods that you need to use actually need to match what you have within Intacct. So not only would we need to alter the columns it's given us, but we'd also need to add the remaining periods. And let's be very honest here. Intacct can be a bit temperamental on a good day when we're importing templates. We've all run into the errors before, so let's not make things harder on ourselves. There's going to be an easier option. Now, I have a motto here that we're not basic, so we're not going to use basic templates. Well, I don't really know if that's an actual true motto, but we're going to pretend it is for today. So instead of using just this basic template that we've got to manipulate all this data for, we are going to make a custom template. It's going to have all of our system periods in there for us ready to go and include all of our available dimensions so we don't have to add those later on the template. All right, to do that, we are going to go to budgets and then budgets report. We're going to put in our reporting periods for our future budget. So here I put in my January 2024 through the end of December of 2024. Now it is going to default to whatever your default budget here is in that budget type. That doesn't really so much matter for this example because we're just getting a template and we can put whatever budget ID we want to on here because all of this is going to be blank when we export it. It's just going to have the appropriate column headers. Now, you don't need to worry about any filters or selecting any kind of GL accounts here. The only thing that we need to select is down towards the bottom under the format section. So we are going to check this box for use CSV importable format. This is going to automatically put all of our dimensions on our template for us. Then, if you plan on using notes in your budget, you want to select the option for Include Notes Columns for Periods. This is going to add a column after each reporting period for you to enter any notes that are applicable to that particular period and that particular line. So, for example, maybe you know that in the summer, your marketing spend is going to go up due to several conferences and you bought all this cool swag that you need to hand out. So you want to make a note, say, on your marketing budget line that, you've got 4 conferences coming up in the summer. And that's why your quarterly periods here, that's why it spiked for that one. Or maybe come November and December, you've doubled your, company meals expense line because you're throwing all these cool holiday parties, which you know that you need to invite your LBMC friends to. So with notes, we can make comments on any period, any line, so that we understand those anticipated shifts in our spend. So, all right, we've got our settings. We're going to export our file now. And then once we export that custom template, all that's left to do is enter our budget data and save it as a CSV and then import it. But what should we do if we want to create our budget from existing data? So if you want to use your current year's budget and just maybe alter those amounts, we can use that same budget report that we just used to create the custom template. But this time we're going to change the dates a little bit. So instead of just picking our future dates, we're actually going to pick my start date as the current year start date and my ending date as my future ending date. Now, this is going to give me 24 periods on my template. The first 12 are going to have data in them for my current year budget. And then my second set, for my future periods, those are going to be blank. Now, at this point, all I need to do here is manipulate the data to whatever I need to. So I can see my 2023 numbers. Maybe I want to, increase revenue by 5% month over month. Maybe I need to, trim down my expenses a little bit. I've got that ability to do that here. I'm going to put my final budget numbers in for my 2024 columns. Then I can delete my 2023 if I want to, save that as a CSV, and then import it into the system. So pretty easy there. Now, Some people, while they do like to use their actual budget for, for the current year to alter their budget for the future year, they might choose to also look at our actuals. So we want to be able to look at our GL transactions. We want to then determine what our future budget needs to be. So we're actually going to walk through that together in a demo here. All right, so I'm going to hop over to Intacct. You can see that I'm in my little green apple demo here, and I am going to do a few things. And I'm first of all, I'm going to just make sure that I do have a default budget in the system. So I'm going to go to budgets and then our budgets repository. All right, so I've got my annual budget listed here, and it is listed as my default budget. So just making sure that we've got that there. And then again, need to make sure my reporting periods are out there as well. So I can go to reports, setup, and then we're going to go over here to reporting periods, just verify. Okay, yep, great. We've got all the way out to the end of 2024. Now, again, remember, if we don't have those, we can quickly add them if we're using standard budgeting periods and standard accounting months. We're going to go to general ledger. We can go ahead and do a journal entry where we can just do a draft journal entry. It doesn't have to be to anything special. You can literally do a penny in and out and just hit draft. Again, just making sure that that posting date is that future end date that you're wanting. And again, if you want to go ahead and bump it out a couple of years, that's perfectly fine too. All right, so now that I know that I've got the information that I need there, I need to be able to extract my GL transactions. Now, to do that, we are going to build a custom report within the system. Now, we don't have to do this every single year. Once we build it the first time, we can use it going forward. So it'll actually speed up our process come the next year. So for that, I am going to go over to reports, and I'm going to go to all and then to custom reports. And I'm just going to hit that little plus sign next to custom reports. Now, if you've ever built a custom report, this will look familiar to you. We do need to pick a data source. So our primary data source here is going to be our general ledger detail. So I'm going to scroll on down to that. All right, here we are, general ledger detail, and then hit next. Now I need to pick what I want on my report. So there's a few mandatory, if you will, columns that I need on here, and then some optional ones. So first and foremost, we've got to have account number. I'm going to throw account title on here and amount. And then I'm also going to go ahead and put entry date. Now, from here going forward, it is a decision of, we talked about earlier, what do we want to budget to? Do we want to budget to multiple dimensions? Do we want to budget to a single dimension? It is entirely up to you. So at this point, we would add whatever dimensions we want to into this report in order to get that level of detail. For this example, I'm going to keep it kind of simple, and I'm just going to simply budget to our location. Now, I can hit next, but I want to point out a few things. We don't have to add any calculated columns. We don't have to worry about any kind of column sequence or anything like that. The only thing that I am going to do, and again, just strictly because this is how I'm building my personal budget here within Intacct for my company, I am going to go ahead and filter my GL accounts. I don't necessarily need to budget towards everything. My company here at Green Apple, we really only want to budget towards maybe our revenue and our expenses. So I'm going to go ahead and pre-filter. So this way I don't have to pull data out when I export it. And I'm just going to say, is it greater than or equal to, I'm going to pick my revenue account. And then I'm going to pick account number again, and then is less than or equal to, and I'm just going to go pick my last account out here. Now, finally, all I need to do now is save it and add it to our menu. So I'm going to call it just something simple that I, can recognize later. So I'm going to call it GL details for budgeting. And I can go ahead and add this to the menu. This is going to make it available in my general ledger application, but it is also going to be available under reports and custom reports. So let's save that. and let's go out and run it. So I'm going to go to custom reports. So here's our report that we just built, and I'm going to run this. Now, when you are running your actuals, you do need to decide, are we pulling just a portion of our current year? Are we wanting to have a rolling 12 months? It's really entirely up to you. Now, for this purpose, I am going to go ahead and pull a 12-month detail. I'm going to ask you to ignore the fact that I'm going to pick the year 2019. Just pretend that we're in the year 2019 and all of our troubles are behind us. So that's what data is in the system. So let's go to 2019. And I'm just going to pull 12 months worth of data here. All right, now I don't need to filter anything down here because I've already built in my filters the way I want them when I built my report. So all I have to do at this point is I'm just going to go up here and hit export and export that to a CSV. Now, why I download that, just a little bit of a caveat here. This is not going to be pretty. We are going to have to manipulate the data a little bit to make it usable for us. But I have a feeling that a majority of the people on this call tend to love spreadsheets and data. And don't pretend like you don't, because I do know that you guys, and I know you do. We are going to manipulate that data and have a good time doing that. So again, I promised you it wasn't going to look pretty, and that's the truth. We've got a long list of data here, different transactions. Again, we're pretending like we don't see that 2019 there. But this is not really, I can't really do much with this, okay? So first thing we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and put this in a pivot table. So I'm going to go up to Insert and hit Pivot Table. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add these data points to my rows and my columns. And the first one that I'm going to move over is my account title. Now, you might have noticed on a budget template that account title is actually not one of the columns that are on there. And that is true. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't tend to memorize my full chart of accounts. And if you do, you get the gold star for today. So I actually recommend going ahead and putting that account title here. So that way you don't have to just look at a GL account number and kind of hope that you get it correct. Then we're going to put that account number right underneath it. I am going to move my location ID. And again, if you have multiple dimensions that you're wanting to budget towards, go ahead and list them all here in our rows. I'm going to move my entry date over to my columns and then amount down to my values. All right, so looking at it, okay, we're getting there, but we still need to kind of clean it up a bit. So we are going to go over to this Design tab that's next to the Pivot Table Analyze, and we are going to select a few options over here. First, under our subtotals option, we want to turn off subtotals. Under grand totals, we want to turn off for our rows and our columns. All right, so we're getting closer. Still need to update it a little bit more. Under report layout, we are going to choose to show that in tabular form. And then one more option under report layout, we are going to then repeat all of our item labels on all of our rows. Okay, so this is looking a lot better. However, we're still going to clean it up just a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight my data here. I'm going to copy it, bring it over to a new tab, and then paste our values. All right, so gonna just move our months down here, take away this first row. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and filter on our account. Let's just sort that. Okay, so we're looking better. Now, Intacct inherently is going to know the normal balance of every one of your accounts, because if you remember, when we design your chart of accounts, like when we bring that in, we are telling it what the normal balance is for every single one of our accounts. And because we're doing that, we actually don't have to have negatives in order to denote one way or the other. In fact, Intacct actually recommends that you don't have negatives in here. So we need to pull the negatives out of our revenue accounts. Well, that is easy enough. So I could just go ahead and highlight these. And if I hit insert rows here, it's just going to put a whole bunch of rows between January and February. Instead, if we just click them one by one and then insert our rows, that's where it's going to go ahead and put the rows, the blank rows between, or the blank columns between. Then it's just a few simple formulas. So we want to get our absolute value of our number here. I am going to go ahead and bring that on down to all of our revenue, copy that over, and we need to then copy that over to our columns over here. Okay, so now I'm just going to go copy, paste our values. And then one more data point is we are just going to shift them on over by one. We're going to say, okay. All right, now that leaves us with the appropriate positive values in our columns that we need. I can get rid of these negative ones now and hit delete. Okay, so we're almost there. There is one thing that I want to go ahead and do. Intacct recommends that we never leave a field blank, that if it truly is a blank or a zero, that we put a zero in its place. So I'm just going to highlight this and I'm going to go up to replace, and I'm not going to search for anything, and I'm just going to replace it with a zero. So what this will do is it'll just search for blanks and replace it with zero. Okay, so we now have our data. So at this point, I can update my numbers however I want to. Okay, we've got the ability to maybe increase our revenue by a certain percentage, cut some of those expenses, add maybe any additional lines. Maybe we added a new location since last year, since we had these actuals. We can go ahead and do that here. But we're going to, again, pretend that I have manipulated this data and that we are ready to get it into the system. So I need a template for that. I can't put it in just in this state, so I need to put that on a template. So let's walk through grabbing that template again, just like we talked about earlier. All right, back in my Intacct over here, we're going to go to budgets and budget report. Okay, so let's pick our periods that we need. We're going to go January 2024 through December 2024. Again, it doesn't really matter here on this budget type. It's just going to default to your annual or your normal default one. And then I'm going to select this option for use CSV importable format. Okay, let's export that to a CSV and see what that looks like. Okay, so it's a bunch of blank information, and that's great. That's what I actually needed. So I'm going to delete what's in there, and let's expand this out. So as we can see here, we've got our column for our budget ID. We've got our account number field, and then we have every single dimension that is available to me within my environment. Now, whether I choose to use it or I don't, that's completely up to you. Again, for my example, I'm truly only going to budget to my location for now. So I'm going to go ahead and just take out these others. I could leave them in there if I chose to, but I don't really want to. So we're going to take that out. Now, all I'm down to is my account number, my location, and here's my 12 periods listed here, ready for me to go. So all I got to do is go on over here. We're going to highlight our data because it is actually already in the columns that I need. Copy that over and then go over to my template and paste my values. Now, all I got to do is add my default budget ID here. Going to pick annual budget. Great. And copy that down. Okay, so we're ready to go. So I'm going to go File, Save As. We are going to pick we'll say 2024 budget and hit save. All right, so now we're ready to put that into the system. So let's go back over to Intacct. We can go into our budgets, budget repositories here again. import, and we are going to pick our file. And we will import that. So while that's going, a couple of things to keep in mind. If you get your budget ID wrong, it is going to error the whole thing out. We want to make sure that we're verifying those amounts are formatted as text, that they don't have dollar symbols, they don't have commas. We want to make sure that it truly is just a really clean CSV file for upload. Now, once it finishes uploading, you will get a notification that it was either a success or a fail. So we are going to go ahead and look at that. I'm going to hit budget details next to our annual budget. Okay, well, it's still processing. So I'll let that process and we'll hop back over into our presentation here. All right, Dawn, you're up with poll question number 2.
Poll question number 2 coming up. Let me launch that. And again, it's budget oriented. How do you currently handle your budget? Spreadsheets? The add-on Sage Intacct Planning, formerly known as SIBP, or do you use other budgeting software solutions, or you're really not sure what your organization does? And Beth, you do know your audience based on the results that are coming in.
Oh, I was wondering if I knew.
All right, folks, I'm going to give you about 5 seconds more. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the overall winner by a staggering majority is spreadsheets.
Again, we love our spreadsheets. Like
we do.
So I'm never going to fault you for spreadsheets, but you just might want to also keep it within Intacct so you can use it with your financial reports. But totally understand spreadsheets. All right. So thank you, Dawn. Really appreciate that. Now, I did just receive an email from Intacct saying that my import was a success. So wonderful. We've got our import into the system. So let's just double check and make sure what that looks like. I'm going to refresh that screen for me. All right, and here's all of our data listed. So we've got our account numbers, our account title, and then the location title. So here, you can see I truly am budgeting to the GL account, to the location. And if I had any other variations, then you would start to see those over here in those additional columns. So our department, our project, even vendor or customer. So we would see that listed here. Okay, wonderful. So let's talk about some common import errors that you might run into. So there's a few main ones that we typically see across the help desk. So first and foremost, our GL account is not valid. So you want to verify that you've entered the account number correctly, that that account has been created in your general ledger. And not only that, but it is listed as active. You want to make sure of that. Then we've also got duplicate budget accounts for a period. So for this, we want to verify that only a single amount has been entered by period for each GL account and dimension combination. We've also got incorrect, not budgetable, or even missing reporting periods. So we want to verify that your reporting periods are correct and that the reporting periods are set up to be used for budgeting. The reporting periods in your import file must match exactly the reporting periods that you have within Intacct. Again, this is why creating that custom template is super beneficial because it kind of cuts out the guesswork there. It already is going to look at the system, see what reporting periods that you have, and it's going to title them correctly. All right, and then finally, invalid budget ID. So just like we talked about a few minutes ago about if you spell it wrong, it's going to be wrong when it imports. It's kind of an all or nothing thing. So we want to verify that that budget ID has been created and that the value that we've entered in that budget ID column exactly matches the budget ID within Intacct. All right, so at this point, we've got our budget in Intacct, and that is cause for celebration. That is cause to go get one of those pumpkin spice lattes that we've been thinking about this entire time. From here, we're just going to go into kind of a maintenance mode, right? So hopefully we don't have to touch this budget again until next year. And at that point, we kind of start all over again with this process where we go in, do we have the right reporting periods in the system, so on and so forth. Okay. But what if we need to make a change to our budget? You know, maybe you started looking at it, you got down there and you thought, oh gosh, there's an extra zero when there shouldn't have been. And that is really going to, you know, throw our CFO for a loop. So, or maybe you acquired a new location sometime during the year and you want to go ahead and put in a budget for that new location for the remainder of the year. So we can absolutely do that. And it might be easier to do that manually in the system. Those small kind of changes, it might just be a little bit easier to do that. So we can do that by going over into our budget over here. So if I hit budgets next to sales revenue, I can see all the different lines for my budget. If I go and hit view next to my information, let me go back to budget details. If I hit view next to my sales revenue, I can then see all of my periods here. Now I can edit these and change them. Maybe again, I put 80,454 for January, which man, if our revenue for that for January is that, then hoorah. While the rest of our year is wrong, we can go ahead and change that here, just, you know, making those little small tweaks here and there. However, if it is a bit more of a significant change, we can always update our template and re-import that into the system. So just as a reminder that if you have a blank field, which is not necessarily best practice, we want to go ahead and populate zeros. But if we have a blank or a zero, it's going to override whatever is already in the system. So just keep that in mind when you are re-importing a budget. After our budgets are in the system, we then can report on them in many different ways. So we can design a variety of financial reports that include actuals, budgets, or a forecast using a combination of budget and actual data. In most cases, your company already has some financial reports that use budget data, such as a budget to actual report. You can create an unlimited number of additional budget reports just by including those budget columns, selecting the reporting period that we want to report on, and then selecting the budget that we want to use. Now, one of the benefits that we talked about earlier about having one main budget and just continuously appending it by adding those future periods is that it takes away the need to update our financial reports that use the budget. As we can see here, this report is an actual to budget for G&A expenses. Now, your out-of-the-box financial reports that come standard with Intacct that are utilizing budgets are going to use your default budget that's in the system. So by continuously updating that budget each year, that means that you can run your reports for any time frame, and it's going to pull the correct budget data accurately, okay? But if I have multiple budgets or a budget for each year, I would need to make copies of this report, edit each copy to retrieve the appropriate budget. And depending on how many budgets that you have, your report list might get really long. So just keep that in mind. Now, when using budgets within your financial reports, you can add any of your budgets as well as variations, computations using your budget. So for example, we could have a budget minus actual difference, which is the budget minus the actual amount. But maybe we want to see a prorated forecast. So that is going to calculate a mid-period budget forecast by adding the actual amount so far up to the as of date that you're running your report, and then a prorated budget for the remainder of the period using a calculation. Now, if you ever get confused about what each of these do, don't be afraid to hit that little question mark over beside column type when you're building your financial report. Intacct has a lot of great information, and it can explain every single one of these to you in greater detail. Okay, but budgets aren't just for reports. So we can build dashboards using the system budgets and using those financial reports that we built. So we can bring our budget reports that we build and not only display the reports here, but also include any budget graphs. And if you subscribe to ICRW or IVE and you look out in the Intacct library, there are some additional reports that are kind of neat out there that you can absolutely add to your environment that talk about and use budgets. So take a look out at those if you have that license. All right, Dawn, you're up. Poll question number 3.
Awesome. We're going to have a little bit of fun with this one. Poll question number 3 is about your daily commute. So during your drive time, what is your entertainment? Do you listen to podcasts, sports radio, talk radio, National Public Radio? Do you have your favorite playlist or music on the radio? Do you listen to children fighting in the back seat? Do you enjoy blissful silence? Or are you like me and you don't commute, or you have some other entertainment altogether?
Dawn,
So
I'm
I'll give
wondering if it counts as a commute if I just walk from my room to my office. Does that count as my commute?
You know what? If you're wearing headphones or earplugs, and I think it would.
I
Think it
I
would.
do.
Awesome.
I typically listen to a book on audio.
So I'm going to end the poll in 5 seconds. Last chance to answer the poll question. Then I'm going to share the results. And here we go. We have music, looks like it's the overwhelming favorite, followed by non-commuters, and then podcasts, and then the radio and blissful silence. Only 3% of our audience has mayhem in the back seat. So I'm happy for everyone. So that's back to you.
All right. Okay, so we're nearing the end of this. I know budget fun can be had all day long, but we do have a limited amount of time here. All right, so let's talk about some frequently asked questions that we get when it comes to budgets. Do revenue accounts need to have a negative balance to recognize this as a credit? So just like we walked through in our example, no, Intacct understands the normal balance of an account from the account definition. That's what we defined when we brought in our chart of accounts initially into Intacct. So positive budget values are recognized as being credits for a revenue account. If we have global consolidations, which I know some of the people on the call do, is it possible to have a consolidated book budget? Yes, it absolutely is. Is it possible to code the budget figure to a header code that covers a range of nominal codes? So for example, a budget for code 41,000, which is compared to actuals in all of our codes from 41,000 to 41,999. So no, there is no split from header to lines capability, nor budget at a group level in Intacct. But by using an account group to represent that 41,000 to 41,999 account, then we could see actuals versus budget at the group level. All right, what type of file should we be using when we're importing this into Intacct? Definitely needs to be a CSV. That's the common thing across the board with Intacct. We always want to use a CSV, always want to make sure that we are formatting that correctly. All right, can we set up budgets for statistical accounts? Yeah, absolutely we can. You might want to budget towards specific KPIs, maybe headcount, maybe even visits. Is it better to load budgets at a top or entity level? So it is best practice to load them at the top level. All right, there are plenty of additional resources out there for you if you have more questions about budgets or you just want to learn more. So, first and foremost, don't be afraid to utilize that good old help center. So anytime you're on certain screens, if you go up to your help and support and hit help on this page, it's going to take you directly to an article that talks about the exact page that you're looking at, or you could simply just type in budgets and it's going to take you to the appropriate information there within the help center. Now, also out in Sage University, there is a fantastic course called Working with Budgets. It's not very long, but it is quite in depth. And all the things that we walked through in our live demo with, building that custom report, exporting it to Excel, manipulating the data, just like we did with the pivot tables, it goes through all of that in there too. So that is a fantastic course out there. And then last but definitely not least, our Intacct community. I hope everybody has access to this. This is a phenomenal resource where you can go out and search for Intacct articles or different kind of webinars. This is a great resource when it comes to budgets and anything really in general. All right, Dawn, that's about it for budgets.
All right. And for our audience, Beth is going to be coming back in a few minutes to do the R3 highlights. So if you have any questions on what you've just seen with budgeting, you can put them in the Q&A, and either we will answer them if we have time at the end of the presentation, or we'll get back to you individually. But right now, I am delighted to bring Brandon Tobin on. He is from Avid Exchange, and he has a very brief presentation for us. Avid Exchange was kind enough to sponsor this particular 2-hour Lunch and Learn Hot Topics. And so everyone at LBMC Technology Solutions is thankful for that sponsorship. And if you're in the Charlotte area, you should have received an invitation for our customer appreciation dinner on October 16th at a great restaurant, the Fahrenheit. And Avid Exchange is the sponsor, one of the sponsors of that dinner, along with Sage Intacct. And if you didn't receive an invitation to Fahrenheit, but you'd like one, please ping me in the chat, and I'll make sure that we get an invitation out to you. But Brandon, you can unmute, and without further ado, the chair is yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Dawn. Yeah, super thankful to be here too. My name is Brandon Tobin, kind of the go-to sales guy, I guess, for Avid Exchange, anyone that's using Sage Intacct. So if anyone's interested in AP automation, we might end up getting to talk someday, but just really quickly wanted to let you know what it's about, who we are, kind of what makes us special or different from other AP automation providers, as well as our integration and relationship with Sage Intacct. And then we'll have like a link to a customer story, someone who's used it to save a ton of time by automating their accounts payable with Avid Exchange. So to kind of get right into it real quick, what makes us special or different is one, experience. We've been around a long time. We started in the year 2000, and our headquarters is in Charlotte, North Carolina. So over 20 years of experience and a lot of customers, a lot of vendors in our network. Some of y'all may have even received payments through the Avid Exchange network. We have about 1 million vendors being paid through us. And that is different. Some of the other AP automation providers out there will do one or the other. Like they'll help do the data entry of invoices or approval workflows, maybe even PO matching, but they won't do payments like send checks for you or ACH or virtual credit cards, kind of like AP payments to vendors. So we definitely do both. We've got our money transmitter license. So we're kind of like a bank that way. And actually a lot of banks and credit unions use us and partner with us as well as hundreds of other accounting softwares that we integrate with. Interesting thing about support, kind of there on the right, a good 60% or more of our employees, of our 1,600 employees, have nothing to do with sales. They're totally to do with supporting our customers and our vendors. So we actually have phone support, which is a little rare in this day and age. Sometimes you'll just get, email or chat support. Even our vendor network gets support. If they want to check on the status of a payment or an invoice, they can talk to somebody on our end, or if they need to update their bank details. There was quite a bit of that at the beginning of the year with First Republic, Silicon Valley Bank. That's something that our support team actually helps with, as opposed to you having to deal with kind of the SOX control compliance headache, for example, of updating your vendor's bank details, and something that we can help them deal with securely. And again, it's just to save you all time. So big picture, what we do when it comes to AP automation and processing payments for our customers is ingestion and capture of invoices, basically doing the data entry, as well as kind of automating the 2 or 3-way match if they are associated with a purchase order. And if they're not, then automatically routing them through approval workflows. And you can determine what rules that's based on. If it's based on what department or entity or even the amount of the invoice or whatever, we can set up rules so that they're automatically routed to approvers who can then approve things remotely. I saw a good 25% of us in here don't commute, which is nice. So this is what a lot of our customers like about it, is it's browser based. It's nothing that's on-prem, so you could use it from a cell phone, tablet, laptop, it doesn't matter. And we also don't charge per user either. We have unlimited users. It's a very scalable pricing model. So even if an organization has 20, 30, 40, 50 people that might need to approve invoices here or there, you're not going to have to pay license fees for any of those people. So it's really nice. It kind of works out well that way. And then on the pay side, kind of mentioned already our supplier services team. There is, of course, a portal for suppliers to kind of get updates on invoices and payments too. Kind of the best part about having a supplier services team that will actually help onboard your vendors from accepting checks to an electronic method of payment is a much higher chance of kind of converting them to an electronic payment method and being able to pass some of those rebates onto you, our customers. So in a lot of ways, this is something that could even pay for itself, if not make money. I think probably the most common story that I hear from talking to a lot of customers is that they're growing. Their volume of invoices and payments is getting a little too high. They're thinking about adding headcount, but then they're kind of pleasantly surprised to find that paying for software like an AP automation service like this, it's 10 times cheaper than hiring another person, and the ROI is really fantastic. So if you want to scan that QR code, and I think even the customer success story will be emailed out afterwards, but it was FL Star Development. That's kind of what they said, is that they saved over 60% of the time that they used to spend processing their invoices. It used to take over 20 hours a month, and now it takes less than 4 hours a month. So they've saved a ton of time. People can get more done in the office that's actually strategic and not quite so manual, as AP automations can be, process can be these days. So whether it's getting rid of filing cabinets, getting rid of paper, or if maybe it's already all email and kind of digital based and you just want it to be more streamlined so you can save money, we can help with all of those areas. So if you have any interest in AP automation, kind of exploring this further, just go ahead and talk to whoever your account manager or rep is with LBMC, and they'll hopefully set up a call for us. Thanks.
We most definitely will. So we've got poll question number 3, or number 4,
Oh,
excuse
I thought
me.
we were on 4.
Yeah, we are on
Okay, cool.
4.
All right.
User error here. English major, not an accounting major. Poll question number 4. Does your organization suffer from any of these AP processing frustrations? Manual data entry across multiple systems, breakdowns in workflow approvals, lack of spend visibility, long financial close process, limited visibility in payment status and approvals. And you can click all that apply. I think we're seeing a lot of pain around AP processing. And really, the next generation of, the financial accounting office is, how do we find technology that we can leverage to remove these frustrations and to put our human intelligence into more strategic projects? So I'm going to give this 5 more seconds. And then we're going to end the poll. and I'm going to share the results. I'm just dying to know what other frustrations we are feeling. So if when you received the survey, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us, I would love to know. We did the best we could thinking about the common things that we hear, but thank you for sharing your feedback. Now we're going to go back to Beth.
Thanks, Don.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate your presentation.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, I noticed that a lot of people are doing that manual data entry across multiple systems. So definitely can see how one of those automating services are going to be super beneficial. All right, so I'm going to share my screen again. And this time, instead of going on and on about budgets, we are going to talk about our R3 release highlights. So just as a reminder that this is just the highlights. This is not going to be all-inclusive list of everything that they did in R3. So you want to make sure that you are going through and reading those release notes that Intacct puts out. So you typically can find those when you log into your Intacct environment. They usually are on the home screen. You'll see, hey, release 3 is here. Read the release notes. I do ask that you go read those because, again, we're not going to have time to cover everything. So let's be on the lookout for a few icons that I've got throughout this presentation. So the little gear icon means that there is going to need to be some configuration done in order to utilize this new feature. A little lock is going to mean that we need to update some permissions. And then this little thought bubble down here means that this idea came from you. So I don't know if you know this, but Intacct will very frequently go out to the Intacct community and just take a look at the ideas that have been submitted. And they will very frequently put those ideas into practice and push those out in those releases. Now, several of the items that we're going to talk about today actually did come from you all. So make sure that you keep going out to the community, putting those ideas out there. And if you do that, let us know because we will go vote for your idea for you. We'll tell our rest of our team. Now, if the idea stinks, we won't. No, I'm just kidding. We won't do that. But we will vote for your ideas that you put out there. Dawn, I'm going to hand it right back over to you for poll question number 5.
Awesome. So let me launch poll question number 5. Hang on a second. I'm having issues. Here we go. Poll question number 5. LBMC Technology Solutions does so much more than just ERP. So I would like to ask you if you'd like to work more closely with us by being a customer success story. That's where we would interview you and write up what pain points the software and our help solve for you, as well as what benefits you experienced with the software. If you would like time with your strategic account manager to review the add-on modules that Sage Intacct offers to enhance your core financials, we've got that. And if you'd like to learn about other LBMC products and services beyond just Sage Intacct, we're more than happy to spend some time with you talking about our network engineering products, such as like managed service provider, cybersecurity. We've got a CRM team, and one of our team members from another area of our business, Mike Soul, will be speaking a little bit later. But we've got, like I said, ERP and much more that we can offer. So we'll give this a few more seconds. And then I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So those 6 wonderful people of you who said that you'd like to be a customer success story, I will be in touch with you. And then those of you who would like to review add-on modules, I will be sure and let your strategic account managers know about that. And for those who would like to learn about other LBMC products and services, we will follow up with you as well. And if you're not sure, but you'd like a phone call anyway, or you'd like to talk to me or any of our team, please let me know and we will make it happen.
All right. Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. So let's take a look at what has changed under our company application. All right, the user interface for our document numbering has been updated. We've got a redesign here. So previously, when we wanted to create a document sequencing for things like invoices, vendors, customers, we had multiple tabs that we had to get through. It was a little bit harder to navigate, a little bit harder to see what our outcome was going to be. But now within Intacct, they've consolidated that down to one page. We can easily preview what our sequencing is going to look like. And just as a reminder, at this point in time, numeric sequencing is all that is supported. And by numeric, I just simply mean that the consecutive sequencing that it's going to do for you is only going to support numeric ones. We can still continue to have a fixed prefix, a fixed suffix that maybe has those alpha characters in it. But for the actual sequencing portion, it just only supports numeric sequencing at this point in time. All right, looking over at our general ledger. So this idea came from the community. It came from you all. So Intacct has now added the option to exclude adjustments in our trial balance reports. Now, this option is especially useful if your company does not process adjustments because it's going to simplify the report without reducing the information that the report contains. Now, here we can see what our standard trial balance looks like with the adjustments. We've got our adjusting debit, we've got our adjusting credits here. But after we select that option, we are going to be able to exclude those adjustment columns, maybe if we don't do them for our company. And this is what that trial balance is now going to look like. So a lot cleaner. If we're not using those adjustments, we don't want all those zeros down the rows. We don't have to have them. Got a clean report here. All right, so some things are going on with payroll. So Sage Intacct Payroll powered by ADP is now available, and it's more than just your standard payroll here. So it's got timekeeping, we've got benefits admin, and we've even got enhanced HR functions. So if you are interested in this, please reach out to your LBMC account executive. They can get you some more information on that, but super cool rollout here. Don, there's no rest for you. I'm going to throw it back over to you.
I know
number
we
six.
are. We're just one right after another, rapid fire here. And speaking of payroll, when it comes to payroll, what do you use? Are you using ADP Workforce Now already? Do you use Paychecks? Are you using another third-party solution? Do you have a custom solution that you use, or are you doing payroll manually in-house? Or you're just not sure of what you're using for payroll? It's pretty exciting. I was looking at some of the materials for Sage Intacct Payroll, and when you start thinking about all of the different integrations and being able to see the metrics in your reporting on, for many companies, what is their largest expense, namely payroll, it's pretty powerful. All right, I'm going to end the poll in 5 seconds. And here are the results. Many of you are already working with ADP Workforce Now. We've got a few people on Paychecks. We've got a lot of people on another third-party solution. And then we've got some that are using custom and in-house. So back to you, Beth. Thanks for sharing, team.
Awesome. Okay, so there are some exciting updates to accounts payable. You have asked for it. You've begged for it. Vendor approvals are now a thing within Intacct. I was so excited when I saw that this was coming out in the release. So now we can manage that whole vendor approval process directly within Intacct. You know, before this, one of the ways we were able to kind of get around this and sort of have an approval process is we would typically build maybe a smart event that would trigger an email anytime someone put in a new vendor. But there is no need for that now. We have the ability to do vendor approvals within the system. So in order to enable this, there's going to be some configuration that needs to be done. There's got to be some permissions that needs to be updated. So let's just keep that in mind as we go through here. Now, whoever is going to be the person that's going to be approving the vendors, you're going to need to make sure that we've got this new permission enabled under our accounts payable permission section for approve vendors list. And then you also need to go into your personal preferences and under request for approval, go ahead and select that box for vendor. This is going to send you an email notification anytime someone puts in a new vendor that needs to be approved. Now, before we enable the vendor approval within accounts payable, you do have to make sure that you have updated your permissions to be an approver. And that's because when we turn on enable vendor approval under accounts payable, configure, we have this accounts payable portion here. When we select this box, you're going to get a pop-up that says, hey, there is a vendor approval migration that's going to happen as soon as you hit save and you hit proceed. What that's going to do is it's going to take your existing vendors, whether they're inactive or active, and it's going to go ahead and mark them all as approved. And as it's doing that behind the scenes, it's actually going to, whoever checks this box and saves the configuration, it's actually going to set them as the record on the audit trail as being approved by. Okay, so that is why it is important that you have to update your permissions first, because it's going to say that you approved all of the vendors that you have out in the system. So just make sure we've got those approvals, those permissions set first. All right, so again, once we've got those permissions, we're going to go to accounts payable, setup, configuration. We're going to check the box for enable vendor approval. You also want to go ahead and check that box for enable notifications. Again, we talked about updating your permissions, your actual preferences, but we also need to check this box here. Now, when you check this box, not only could your users who are going to be approving it get those email notifications, but the people who will be submitting those vendors, if they go under their personal preferences as well, there is an option to be notified when they have had a vendor get approved. So I do recommend telling everyone to turn those on. All right. Now, how does this work? So first, we're going to enable those approvals in the system, establish who's going to be approving. Then users can go add new vendors or edit our existing ones. Now, once it is submitted for approval, while it's still awaiting approval, your users can actually go ahead and put in a purchase order, put in a vendor invoice, whatever it may be. They can go ahead and use that vendor that they have submitted for approval. Now, they cannot save it. They cannot post it. You can put it in as a draft and come back to it after it's been approved, but you cannot post it to the GL at that point. You'll get a warning across the top. Now, approvers will be notified that a vendor has been submitted for approval and can approve or decline it. And when they go to decline it, they can go ahead and put in kind of an optional little blurb of why they're declining it. I do recommend doing that so that your user who submitted it isn't just, scratching their head. If a vendor is declined, the submitter is going to have an opportunity to go ahead and make some changes and then resubmit that for approval. And then once we've got those approved, users can then edit their draft bills for that vendor and post them. So they typically can, at that point, they can post to the GL. Now that's a lot, but it's a lot easier to see it in person. So we're going to walk through a live demo of that. I'm going to pull up my environment here. So Emma needs to add a new vendor. I can go and I can look at my vendor list that I have in here, and I can see that all of my vendors are listed as approved. I've already configured everything. I've turned everything on. Permissions are granted. So I need to put in a vendor, or Emma does, and I'm going to hit add. Now, I'm going to put in my vendor. I have a new vendor, Paul and Oates LLC. We are renting a building from them now. So 152 Main Street. All right, that is in Huntsville, Alabama, 35750. Okay, great. All right, I'm going to hit submit. So that is going to go off and do its wonderful thing for whoever's going to approve it. But while I wait for approval, I need to go ahead and put in our rent for Hall & Oates LLC. So I'm going to go over to my entity, put in my bill. All right, there's my vendor that I just created that's waiting approval. And again, because it is not fully approved yet, I am going to get this warning. This vendor is in the submitted state. You cannot post a transaction until the vendor has been approved. That's a-okay. I'm going to go ahead and put in my information here. So rent for September, and put in my due date. Gonna pick my account, and it's $10,000. We'll just put that to admin, and I'm going to go ahead and hit draft. Again, I don't have a post button there because it's not able to post yet. Now, on the other side of it, as an approver over in my True login, I just got an email that says, hey, Beth, Emma just put in a vendor into the system. So here's our vendor ID. Here's when it was submitted, and it's for Hall & Oates LLC. They sound like cool dudes. So I am going to go ahead and go into the system and either approve it or deny it. So I can click the link and it'll take me to the approval list, or I can just go to accounts payable and approve vendors. All right, so here's my vendor sitting out here. I can view it. Okay, well, I got my information here. Oh, gosh, you know, Emma, she forgot her head. She didn't put a type ID in here. So I actually need her to do that. So I'm going to decline it and say, please add vendor type. And we're going to decline that. So now Emma is going to get an email that says, hey, you got rejected. You need to fix your vendor. So typically what that looks like is it's just, again, simple email that says, hey, oh, here it finally came through. Let me open that up. All right. So, hey, Emma, the vendor that you submitted, it's been declined. You need to modify it and resubmit it. And here I can see what I need to change. So I need to add the vendor type. I should have remembered that. So I'm going to go find my vendor here. So when I go and I search for it, I can see that is in a state of declined. And I'm going to edit it and then go over to my additional information and pick my type and hit submit. Again, the approver is then going to immediately get an email that says, hey, there is a vendor waiting your approval. Here it is. She made the appropriate corrections, and we're going to hit approve, and I'll hit approve. Now that vendor has been approved, it is ready to use. So Emma then gets an email saying, hey, your vendor was approved. I can go back into my bill, hit edit next to it, and then it's still listed as a draft, but now I have the option to post it because it has been an approved vendor. So I'll hit post, and now we have a posted bill that has hit the GL. Now, alternatively, I can take an existing vendor and make a change to it. So Emma was notified that one of our favorite vendors, Callahan Auto, they have a change in contact, okay? So we're going to go over there to Callahan Auto. That's over in Sandusky, Ohio. and we are going to edit this. Now, it looks like we were sending it to a Tom Callahan, but we found out he's no longer with the company, and so I need to update that. I'm just going to change that to John Smith, and then submit. And then now, just because I already had an existing vendor doesn't mean that it still is not going to go through that approval process because I made some changes to it. So now on the alternative side, as an approver for vendors, I can see that I have a vendor out here that needs approval. Now I can go in and view it. And all right, so I see that, okay, we updated that information. Great, I'm going to go ahead and hit approve and approve. All right, so that is basically our AP approval process in a nutshell. All right, so there's some things to keep in mind here. Single level approval only. This is not like a typical workflow that we might see over in purchasing where it might go through multiple steps or anything like that. This is a single level. You're going to designate either a single approver or maybe even a pool of approvers of whoever gets to it first. You're going to make those permissions. Now, once vendor approval has been enabled, Intacct is going to begin that process of converting all of our current vendors over to an approved state. When this is happening, it could take some time just depending on the volume of vendors that you have in your system. So it is recommended that you do this during off hours, because once it's going, you can't do anything to them. You can't add them, you can't edit them, can't delete them, or even import them. So just do those after hours, so that way it doesn't hold anybody up. Now, whoever does select that vendor approval, like enabling that feature, that person will get an email notification when the process has been complete. And from everything that I have tested, it actually goes pretty quickly, even with a large volume of vendors. But just on the off chance, go ahead and run that off hours. Now, if a user edits an existing vendor, the approver doesn't really see what was changed. Now, Intacct does say that you'll be able to view the audit trail in order to see what fields were changed. But through all of my testing, it actually never really populated until it was already approved, and then I could see what changed. I think some enhancements are going to be rolling out with that feature. All right, vendors can be edited if they do not have any active payment requests in Intacct. So things like they've got a check ready to cut or an ACH payment that's going to go out. If there's an active payment request in the system for that vendor, you cannot edit it while it's in that state. So what you'll need to do is either complete the payment request or cancel the payment request, edit the vendor, and then go back through and select it for payment again. All right, if you are subscribed to the AP automation feature that is within Intacct, this is for you. So users restricted by entity or department can upload bills from the bills list. Now, this was a thing before where they didn't really have that availability, but now we can. So users with entity restrictions can upload bills at the entity level in those entities where they are not restricted. Now, users with departmental restrictions and no entity level restrictions can upload bills at the top level or the entity level. Those users with departmental and entity restrictions can upload bills in those entities where they are not restricted. Now, AP automation refers to the previous bill from the vendor to provide dimensions for line items. So for example, if the line 2 in the most recent bill from the vendor was coded to the sales department, then line 2 of the new draft bill will be coded to the sales department. So for users with departmental restrictions, departmental coding for those for the uploaded bills is copied from the previous bill as long as the user's restrictions include that department. In this example, line 2 of that draft bill that was set to sales, if the user who uploaded the bill is allowed to enter transactions for the sales department, you'll be able to see that. But if the user is not allowed, then the department field is going to be left blank for that line. So are you using that enter entity bill back feature? I know some of you do. Now, this update is going to give you greater visibility into that AP and the AR side. So here we are able to see links between both the AP bill and the AR invoice that we create for our inter-entity bill. So you'll just be able to click that hyperlink and it will take you to the other. So super beneficial for those who are utilizing it. Moving on over to purchasing, we now have the ability to have matching tolerances. So Intacct automatically is going to compare the quantities and the unit prices that appear on purchasing transactions. So for example, if your workflow is to convert purchase orders to vendor invoices, Intacct compares the quantities and the unit prices between the two transactions. This comparison is going to verify that the quantity and the unit price details agree on the purchase order receipt, and the vendor invoice. All right, so to enable this, we are going to go to purchasing, setup, and then configuration. We're going to select to enable those match tolerances. Now, there is a choice here if you want to add a match tolerance GL account that Intacct will go ahead and put that variance to if you choose to. Now, then we're going to pick our transaction definition that we want to validate. So in this example here, I have picked my transaction definition of vendor invoice. And then I have put in my tolerance percentage for both the quantity and the price. So here I've put it both the same. Now, it might be that you only care about a tolerance for quantity, or it might be that you only care about it as far as the price goes. It is completely up to you, and you can have multiple transaction definitions with different tolerances for each. The other thing that we want to make sure is that you have someone who has the ability to override an exception. So under those permissions for purchasing, we want to select override exception if you want that person to be able to override that. Now, what does all of this mean? So what it means is that if I'm converting something over to a vendor invoice here, Intacct is going to look at it. It's going to look at the quantity. It's going to look at the price, and it's going to determine if the change when I converted it over, if it is at or like above or below a 5% tolerance. Okay. If that is different, it's going to give me an exception. It's going to throw up a little bit of a red flag there, and it's going to put it in a state of exception for me to then be able to review. So that's a lot to kind of take in. It's a lot easier to understand it in action. So we're going to hop on over to our environment, and Emma has some bills that she needs, or some purchase orders that she needs to convert over to a vendor invoice. So I am going to go over to purchasing, and I'm going to go to my purchase order. All right, I need to convert purchase order 76 here. I am going to convert that over to a vendor invoice. Put in my invoice number here. Now I can see that I have ordered 200 at a cost of $320. But the vendor told me that this item is discontinued. They gave me everything that they had, and so that was only 175. So I am going to change my quantity to 175 and hit post. All right, so now I have my vendor invoice here, but you'll notice that my state is at an exception. All right, what does that mean? So that means it actually is not posted to the general ledger. Okay, so as long as this is in a state of exception, it's not posted to the GL. So this is why it's key that we've got someone who can override it if you need to. All right, so we can see this transaction has one or more match exception. So I'm going to hit edit, and I'm going to go down here And I've got my little exclamation point over next to my ID. And we can see here that we have a quantity variance, that it's reduced by 12.5%. So this is outside of my 5% threshold. So that's why I'm getting this exception. But I found out, I talked to the vendor, everything's okay. We're going to go ahead and override that exception. And now my vendor invoice here is back to a state of posting, and that has, pending, and that has officially posted to our general ledger. Now, if I have another purchase order that does, it has a little bit of a variance as well. So I'm going to go to purchase order 74, and I'm going to move that on over to a vendor invoice. Again, put in my document number. All right, so I've got a quantity of 1. They ended up cutting us a little bit of a deal, and we were able to get this for $240 an hour instead. So I'm going to post this. All right, and so for this one, we actually don't have an exception here because it's still within that 5% tolerance. We're a-okay. I'm not getting the flag. All right, so some things to keep in mind here. Any transaction with a state of exception does not post to the general ledger. That's a big one. So you'll want to make sure you keep an eye on that. And those who have the ability to override an exception will not receive an email from the system saying that there is an exception out in the system for them to work through. Instead, it is recommended that you go ahead and build a custom view that you can see all those exceptions available to you just right in your face so that you can work those. Now, the exception state is an available field for reporting, but because it's not posting to the GL, it's really only going to be available over in custom reports. And then finally, kind of a big one, partial conversion for transaction definitions is not allowed when we have matching tolerances on. So that might be a deal breaker for you guys, or it might not, but just keep that in mind as you're going forward and thinking about that. All right, over in time and expense, we've got a kind of a newer update here. So we now have the ability to process reimbursements for our employees via bank files. So some of you have been asking for that. This works very similar to our AP bank file payments. We want to make sure to have those appropriate permissions enabled. And this time we're going to do it under time and expense. We're going to enable it for bank file, for employees, and for that bank file generator. So again, this really works very similar to the whole AP process when we're using bank files to process those. So we're going to go to time and expenses and then go to all reimbursements. We'll select what we want to reimburse. We're going to choose the ACH or bank file as our payment method, select pay in full or, whatever your amount may be, and then hit save. And so then we're going to go ahead, we need to generate that bank file. So we'll go to time and expenses, all bank file generation. We're going to select our payments that we're going to have on this bank file. We're going to generate the file. We're going to download the file from Intacct. You're going to log into your bank portal and you're going to upload it there based on your bank's specific instructions. Then once you have uploaded that, then you are going to go back into Intacct, and just like with checks and just like with other ACH payment files, we do have to then hit confirm in order for it to post to the general ledger. Okay, over in accounts receivable, we've got a few new things available to us. We now have the ability to track payments with document sequencing. So this wasn't a thing before, but now we can create a document sequence in order to track our AR payments. So Document sequencing, again, we talked about that earlier under company. They kind of did a revision to the interface for that. But document sequencing is just a way for Intacct to automatically generate an ID for common transaction and records. And so now that we've got that available over in AR, if we want to utilize that, we'll go and create a sequence under company and the document sequencing for the new AR payments. And then we're going to go over to accounts receivable under setup to configuration. And we're going to go scroll down until we get to this section right here. It's displayed. And we're going to put that new document sequencing under the payments portion. And then we're going to save it. Now, once we save it, going forward, emphasis on the going forward, we are going to have our payments be auto numbered for us. And just like with most everything within Intacct, when we make a change like that, it is not retroactive. It is only forward facing. So once we turn it on and it does start using that sequence for us, you can see here, I have a payment ID associated with my most recent payment, but my older payments do not have that payment ID. For our multi-currency companies that are on the call, we now have the ability to have applied payments from the individual invoice list over in AR. Now, this wasn't available to multi-currency before, but it is now. It works super simple. I'm going to show you that in action just really quickly. We're going to go over to accounts receivable, go over to our invoices. And now we can see I've got apply payment all the way over here on the right-hand side. Even though I've got a lot of USD ones, but I also have a Canadian one here. When I hit apply payment next to any one of these invoices, a pop-up window is going to come up. And I've got the ability, again, just to receive a payment just like normal. Now, if they have more than one invoice that they are going to be using on here, that's perfectly fine. We select our invoices. We can go ahead and select any additional invoices that are sitting out there, hit add and close, and record our payment just like normal. So just a new added feature for our multi-currency friends. Oh, I did the live demo. Okay, so looking at contracts. So we've got a lot of contracts people on the call. So this one is a good one for you guys. What if we don't want to always defer our revenue? So some of you don't need to defer your revenue for some of your invoicing, and you want to recognize that revenue when you bill that contract line. That's really awesome. In this release, contracts includes an optional workflow that's going to eliminate the requirement to defer your revenue for a contract line if you choose to. And if you have some contract lines that do need deferred revenue, that's not a problem either. You can mix and match it on the same contract. So what does that look like and how does it work? So first and foremost, we're going to enable the revenue recognition on invoice field that is in the contract section of Configure Revenue Management page. And then once that is saved, it's going to create a couple of things. We're going to automatically see on our lines, our contract lines, the ability to select this box for recognize revenue on invoice. And it's also going to create a revenue template that is system generated called recognize revenue on invoice. Very original title there. You cannot edit that template, so just be aware of that. But it is available for you. You do not have to create that. Now, when a contract line has recognized revenue on invoice set to true, the Journal Balances tab only displays sales revenue. It does not display deferred revenue value. So many of us who are working in contracts, we are used to this screen where we're looking at our contract line. We go over to our journal balances and we see typically our deferred revenue and our sales revenue. But here, because I have selected that we want to recognize upon invoicing, there is no deferred revenue for this particular line. Now, again, some things to keep in mind here. So after you create at least one contract line that uses this feature, you can't turn it off again. This is only available to lines that have a billing method of fixed price or quantity based with a variable quantity type. Now, if you guys utilize 2 revenue journals, like you've got that option in the system, Intacct is automatically going to assign that recognize on invoice revenue template to both journals. Any edits or changes to the contract lines billing schedule will be reflected on the revenue schedule, and deleting an invoice clears the associated revenue that's recognized. And then we're going to, if we want to report on renewal forecast data for those contract lines, we are going to run our report on the billing schedule, not the revenue schedule. And if you're using those new kit items that came out in R2, this does not work for that. Okay. Nonprofit friends, we've got a new feature that if you are a traditional fund accounting, not-for-profit, that you have the ability to hide our funds from our entity navigation. So as long as you have that traditional fund accounting selected under company and that company configuration, you then can go into your entities and define which ones are funds. And it won't show up in your entity dropdown anymore. Now, we do have some really cool list enhancements available in Intacct. You can turn on the beta interface here, and it is going to give you a whole new view with a lot of things that you can do. So this is kind of what it looks like after you turn it on. And here's some of the things that it's going to do. So if we talk about customizing all your columns, we can have a split view. So for side-by-side viewing, we can go advanced filtering. We can have our filter count, select our column, select our order. You know, talking about individual columns though, we can resize, we can pick our sorting order. We can freeze our columns to the left. We can even wrap our text from within a column. And our filter icon allows advanced filtering on the column itself. Again, we'll just look at that really quickly. So over in accounts payable, I've got my vendor list here. I can turn on that list beta interface. You can turn that off if it's too overwhelming. But I've got a lot that I can do here. Again, I can resize my columns. I can also, I moved my column. So I can resize my column, drag and drop my columns accordingly. You can see I've got 2 filters already built in. You can utilize and or in this, unlike what you could before. Now, my favorite feature is that split view feature that we've got now our vendors over here and then our individual vendor detail over here to the right. And we can choose to freeze our columns. So if I hit the little gear, I can freeze, and everything to the left is going to freeze while everything to the right doesn't. So if we want to bring in additional columns, we can have everything listed out beside it, but it'll freeze these first 2. We can even save our views here. So I can always turn this back off if I choose to. So explore that. Intacct really wants feedback on these because it's in a few different areas. So try it out, see what you think. Okay, so just as I said earlier, this is just the highlights. This is not even everything. So we want to make sure that you go out and read those release notes. So if you go out to the Help Center, you will find release notes sitting here for you. There's also a video library, super great resource here. There are some videos just on the releases that came out today or this past release. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at techhelp@lbmc.com and we will help you with any of your questions. All right, Dawn, take it away.
All right. Are we on poll question number 7 by my count?
We are.
All right, here is the poll question. I am interested in learning more about, and you can check all that apply here, LBMC Advanced Workflow. And did you guys know that LBMC offers Sage Intacct reports and dashboard training? If you are not using dashboards, you should definitely check into this because dashboards help at every level of the organization. If you are in an executive level, you can take a look at the KPIs and the metrics that matter to you. If, for example, you're in a nonprofit and you're a project manager, you could have your very own dashboard that's limited to your own project. And for people in accounting, it's a wonderful way of helping people to do self-service. The other things that we have available here are Sage Intacct Payroll powered by ADP. This is a relatively new offering, though ADP is a very mature solution, but the integration and the work with Sage Intacct is a new and exciting development. And then we've got some other add-on modules, dynamic allocations, Sage Intelligent Time, Sage Intacct Construction, Sage Intacct Project Accounting, Inventory, and then not sure. So let me end the poll in about 5 seconds here. And I will share the results. And excellent. The group is very interested in Sage Intacct reports and dashboards training. That's wonderful. All right. I think at this point, we are going to turn it over to Mike Soul. And he is from LBMC. And he's got something very exciting to share with us. So Mike, why don't you take it from here?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Beth. Man, you are better than a big old can of Red Bull in the morning. Love the energy and great content. And one of the things that I think is really cool is on that last poll, I saw there were 6 people interested in LBMC advanced workflow, and we haven't even talked about it yet. And that's what I'm going to cover a little bit today. I'm Mike Soul. I manage our intelligent automation practice at LBMC, and I want to cover 3 quick things here in just our last couple of minutes together. One, I want to talk about something pretty exciting that we're doing. I want to give you a quick visual of it, and then give you an opportunity to participate in what we're working on. So, what is it that we're working on? So, we are working on an LBMC developed specific solution that is completely focused on enhancing your Sage Intacct experience across the board. We are calling it LBMC Advanced Workflow. We are using an underlying engine called OnBase. And I know there's actually some folks that registered, I know that are on here are actually OnBase users already. But if you're not familiar with OnBase, it really is a solution that offers a rich set of capabilities around documents, information, advanced workflow. So if you've run into challenges, where you might have some workflow and approval limitations, we can open up some of those conversations. It comes with electronic forms, information governance, document retention, dynamic reporting, things along those lines. Our goal is to expose that functionality within current Sage Intacct screens for you to create custom solutions and even enhance existing solutions that you might have. So that's kind of an open palette discussion. We are, to kind of get the conversations going, and this is what I'm going to show today. We are developing a couple of accelerators, one for AP and one for vendor contract management. A couple of notes on that before I dive in and show you the visual. We really see this as this accelerator as an opportunity to complement or enhance what you might be doing with AP overall. And you'll see that in the visual. We don't see this as an alternative. We see anytime you run into questions or like, I wish I could, ... then hopefully that introduces this opportunity into the conversation. And then vendor contract management, really cool stuff that Beth just showed around vendor approvals. Well, maybe your question in this case, that's awesome, but I wish it could ... maybe involve the fact that there are actual paper documents involved in that contract process that I need to review and collaborate on as a part of that approval process, and those types of things. So that's hopefully what we're going to hit on is answering that question of that is all really cool. I wish I could do one more thing that we can kind of fit into that. So to give you an example and give you a visual about what we're talking about here. Now, I will say before I begin, my ultimate challenge here is the fact of our goal is to expose this functionality without you ever knowing that there's on-base involved or LBMC advanced workflow involved. So I'm going to call out some things, but hopefully it's embedded enough to where it's not even really seen to the actual user. So to kind of get a feel for it, I'm going to go to the bill screen here. And once we're in here, you'll notice as this launches that we've actually added a documents tab. This call right here in this screen is actually on base, pulling it back. So that, and then launching the image as well. So the cool additions that are a part of that process right there are that I can see any number of documents, I can sort, I can filter. Maybe if I have contracts involved and I want to view that as a part of the invoice approval process, I can do that. We're pulling in metadata to drive workflow and obviously giving you an opportunity to see these images right here off the bill screen. But that's kind of just in the door. Also, we see opportunities to help import documents. And I know Beth kind of referred to that as some opportunities to, where and when you can import documents and some restrictions. Well, maybe I want to import documents in additional screens that Intacct doesn't do natively. Or maybe I'd like some really cool features here as I import documents that I want to actually, merge these documents together. What you'll see here is as we import, we can accelerate that. You'll see we've picked up information off of these documents that are coming in the system to help accelerate that process. And then you see some options at the top up here where you can actually merge these maybe supporting documents or things together, import that as a single document. So just really enhance the experience of even getting information into the system. So the exciting thing about this is that gets you the concept, but our idea and what we're building out is to enable this functionality on any Intacct screen and do that easily without custom development and rapidly do it. So I'm going to go in here and show you a similar process, except on the vendor record, and show you how quickly it is to set this up. So when I go into the vendor screen here, you'll see there's a documents tab. When I hit that, there's nothing there because we haven't set it up yet. So here in a matter of about 10 seconds, I'm giving you completely behind the curtains view on this. We're going to enable this Intacct screen, quick add here, right here. So I'm going to do that, hit save. Now I'm going to go back to the vendor screen. Now, if I hit that documents tab, you'll now see that's the exact search screen that we received in the bill record there. And again, from these records, you can quickly see information, but I'll also highlight here for a second, up in this upper right corner, you can actually execute workflow actions off of these documents as well. And so, so that gives you a lot of flexibility. And again, using OnBase as the engine, we can open up that conversation and around workflow to where it doesn't have to be off of things just like dollar amount or entity or things like that. Maybe we can add some logic in there that says, well, I want to go check my actual contract, the terms of my contract as a part of this invoice that comes in, make sure it meets that. Or maybe I need multiple levels of approval, or maybe I need to go out and check an external system for some piece of data that's a part of this process. OnBase enables all of that kind of capability. And so that's kind of concept one, but I want us to take a breather. I'll stop talking for a second and say, in the role of a CFO or a controller, I'm in Intacct. How many workflows am I in? And would I love to be able to get a part and visibility into all of those workflows as a part of my process? And so, this is the really cool thing that I think we're developing here. So we have this thing. Hold on, I'm going to actually go over here to, sorry about that. So I'm going to go into this advanced workflow tab. And what you'll see here is I can, in this screen, I can get access to any workflow that I might be a part of. We're highlighting here the two we've been referring to, looking at invoices where I may have invoices that are awaiting my approval. I've got contracts in here on the left as well. I can take actions, workflow actions from within this screen. But think about like places where I'm involved with employee onboarding, or maybe in terms of acquisitions, in terms of audits, that I'm a part of. Think about having access to any of those workflows within a single screen in the system that I'm in every single day. And so I think that's a really cool opportunity. We can mix documents and electronic forms, those types of things. And even to the point of even to the point of like embedding dashboards. So OnBase brings a set of dashboards within its tool set that are interactive. This meshes, again, these look very much like Intacct dashboards, but we're really tracking the AP process and maybe even data in other systems, and can bring that all into a single view and embedding that into the Intacct screen. So this is just a quick introduction. Hopefully that allowed some light bulbs to go off. And we're really interested in use cases to where you're like, I wish I could do this in Intacct, any number of workflows that might apply. And we're just really soliciting your input. So if any of this struck an idea or struck a thought for you, feel free to contact your strategic account manager, email me directly if you are account executive. Any of those will get filtered back to me. We are really looking for additional use cases to include in our accelerator packages right now. And so really open for that feedback. So with that, poll question number 8.
And this is the final poll question. So my organization would benefit from AP Accelerator, acquisition checklist, audit automation, vendor contract management. And Mike, I have a sneaking suspicion that these are all things that you're working on.
Yes, and really not sure if you're on that. Maybe that is other as well. I've got other ideas. Feel free to pick that as not sure. But yeah, these are. I quickly hit it, but if any of these strike a chord, would love to know that.
Very good. We'll give it another few seconds. And I'm going to end the poll and share the results. And once again, Beth knows the audience. We have contract people here. And thank you. Would you pull up the last slide?
Yep. There you go.
So that was our last poll question. If you've answered all of the poll questions, you are then eligible for CPE credit. Our team over in our parent company handles the distribution of the certificates. They have told me that these will be sent within 2 weeks. It's usually a lot faster, but if for whatever reason you don't receive it, please let me know. The recording, the slides, and the survey will be emailed to you. Beth, do you have time for one quick question?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Would the system approve the inactive vendors as well?
Yes. So when you turn it on that first time, it's going to go ahead and mark all of your vendors, including your inactive ones. It will mark them all as approved.
Great. And finally, I really want to thank our sponsor, Avid Exchange. There's a QR code here for a different ebook, 9 Stats That Define the Modern AP Professional. Please take advantage of that. I will be sending all of the links that Avid Exchange has shared with us in the email with your recording, slides, and survey. And Kimberly, Brandon, Stephanie, and the entire Avid Exchange team, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you as well as all of our customers who are in the Charlotte area or will be in the Charlotte area on October 16th for our customer appreciation dinner. Mike, Beth, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. And I am sure that our audience learned quite a bit. Thanks, everybody.